Hi, my name is John Brink. Thank you for joining us. You're watching A History of the BC Forest Industry. Thanks for joining the History of the BC Forest Industry. My name is John Brink. Our guest today is Keith Spencer. Keith is the General Manager of Vanderhoof Specialty Wood. Good morning, Keith, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, you've been in the industry for a long time, really?
Long time, 50 years.
50 years, since 1970?
1970.
And where did you start?
I started with the West Fraser Company in Quesnel.
In Quesnel.
Yeah, graduated high school, went on the old bench looking for a job, and went every shift until they got tired of seeing me and they hired me.
Yeah. And then, what kind of work did you do there?
Well, started out piling lumber,
Yeah.
and then just worked my way into operating equipment. Then the maintenance superintendent came to me and offered me an apprenticeship for mill writing. So of course I jumped at that, and I spent the next 4 years at the Quesnel mill finishing off my apprenticeship.
And that was the West Fraser mill, and if I recall correctly, that was the first mill really of West Fraser when the three brothers invested into British Columbia, the forest industry in British Columbia, and started or bought a mill in Quesnel. That was the mill, right?
Well, yeah, the actual first mill was called Beaver.
Okay.
The Beaver sawmill, and it was up on the 2 Mile Flat area, and they had bought that one. And very shortly after they had purchased that mill, then they started construction on the new modern, at that time, sawmill.
Right. And then the normal mode of operation used to be the sawmill was in the bush, and they hauled then the rough lumber into the planer mill. Was that the...
That's right. I mean, the 2 Mile Flat, the BCR rail line had gone right through the 2 Mile Flat, so there was, I believe that at the early times in the 50s, there was probably 3 planing facilities there, and the Ketchum brothers had bought one. Right. And that's how they started their business in BC.
Yeah, and even some of their sons that later on run the whole West Fraser operation until recently worked there hands-on, right?
That's right. Hank Ketchum, which was Pete Ketchum's son, spent at least a year and a half working in the mill, running the equipment, understanding the process of the breakdown of the logs and the business, basically, and before he took on the more administrative part of running the company.
And then from that point forward, now you were a maintenance superintendent, then in Quesnel, then where did you go from there?
Well, I went to Dawson Creek. The West Fraser Company had purchased a stud mill in Dawson Creek. It was actually a treating plant and a stud mill. And then they further purchased a stud mill in Chetwynd.
Okay.
So I went up there and worked in the maintenance department. And then West Fraser shut down both of those plants and built a new mill in Chetwynd, and basically brought the people from Dawson Creek and from Chetwynd into their new mill.
Right, and if you say stud mill, that means mainly 2x4, 2x6, no longer than 8 feet,
8
right?
feet, that's right.
And then the new mill that they built, was that a different mill then?
It was a dimension mill. It went 2x4 right up to 2x10, and it was random length from 8 foot to 20 feet.
And they still have that mill today as well?
It's there today. A lot of changes have happened over the years, but yes, still operating.
Especially in regards to technology has changed, but the mill is still there.
That's right. That's right.
Where did you go from there?
Well, from there, in 1982, I went to Vanderhoof. I started working for a company that had just changed its name from Brink, the BC government-owned forest company, to Westar Timber.
Is Brink the company that we all own shares in?
At one time, everybody was given a share, yes.
Yeah. And then what happened?
So in 1982, of course, at that time it was the name had changed to Westar Timber. I was hired as the production manager of the mill. I had worked there for about a year and a half, and worked my way into being the general manager of the Plateau operations, and was responsible for the woodlands, the processing in the sawmill, and the planing.
That was a fairly large mill, though, by comparison, right?
Yes, it was considered one of the bigger mills in the interior, and one of the things that was odd for the mill, not odd, but no other mill had it, was we tree length bark, and then we processed the log into log lengths, and then all the logs were stored inside a heated building. So that was quite different of an approach than other mills.
Why?
That's a good question. Why? It worked well in the wintertime.
Right.
You were able to have the logs stored inside the heated mill. It was easier on the equipment. The sorting of the log gave you a better opportunity to increase the productivity. So all in all, that type of design was actually a very good one.
Good. Where did you go from there?
Well, I worked at the Plateau Mill with Westar Timber until 1988, and then I moved on with Westar Timber out to the Hazeltons. Westar Timber had just finished building a brand new export mill called Carnaby. It had all of the European technology, the link line at that time, for manufacturing metric sized products for the Japanese market. So I went out there in order to manage that mill, plus they had a dimension mill in Kitwanga, and we also had another mill right in what was Southtown Hazelton called the Rim Mill.
So that, as I understand it from you, it was a different area, different species, because when you get to Hazelton, you get more into a coastal mix of interior and coastal.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the majority of the timber was hemlock. It was an interest of our company because that was a preferred species in the Japanese marketplace for their product. The only problem with the hemlock, of course, is it was over matured. There was a lot of hidden rot in the log, so you went through the whole process of logging the timber, bringing it into your mill, and then finding out that probably 60 or 70% of it was rotten.
Right. So then from there you want to back to Vanderhoof?
Yes, I was there until 1991.
Right.
And then I went back to Vanderhoof, and at that time, Westar Timber promoted me as Vice President of Northern Operations. So I was responsible for all of their timber interests from Vanderhoof to the West Coast, which included all of the logging.
Major job.
But of course, a lot of good people in the right places made the job doable. Right?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you ventured out into a different segment of the industry again.
Yeah, I did. In 1991, or towards the end of 1991, Westar Timber had decided to sell off their timber interests. And at that time, I just felt that it wasn't a place for me to be more involved in a corporate style of company. So at that time, I had asked the company if they would sever me off, and that I would go on into the secondary industry, and that all worked out very, very well. The company was very appreciative of what I did. They gave me a severance package, and I immediately went to a construction company called Bid Construction in Vanderhoof, and between us, we built a secondary manufacturing company called Vanderhoof Specialty Wood Products. That was up and running in towards the end of 91, 92, and as to this day is still operating.
And so it was kind of a niche that you kind of envisioned in the marketplace that that kind of started the concept of Vanderhoof Specialty?
Well, with the experience that I gained out in the Hazeltons with the metric export type products, the Japanese marketplace was starting to develop what was a prefabricated product.
Right.
So they were looking at products that were metric in size, small, short, that they could put through their process plants and build components for housing. So we looked at that product and felt that there was a niche for us to be able to remanufacture some of the lower dimension grade wood into these smaller metric products and make a business of it.
And so that was also the period in which government was trying to develop more secondary manufacturing throughout British Columbia?
Yeah, it's kind of the catchphrase at the time was more jobs per cubic meter.
Right.
So that was a very important role that the secondary industry could play. The major companies were very much interested in being a part of it. And what had started to happen was timber sales were starting to be made available to the secondary industry with some rules that you had to abide by in order to apply for it.
So was this the time that the small business sales were developed? That a portion of the AEC was what they say taken back by government to may be distributed to qualified secondary manufacturers?
That's right. Yeah, and what it did for the secondary manufacturers, it gave us the ability to negotiate the products that we needed to purchase for our remanufacturing. And that the timber, of course, was a product that the sawmills needed. So it was a very useful tool to bring us to the table to negotiate with the major companies in being able to have access to some of their fiber.
Right. And subsequently, there were a number of secondary manufacturers here in this region as well as in the rest of the province, right?
Yeah, there was. I mean, it really started to do what the intent was, and that was to develop secondary industry and to start employing more people.
More people. And then that really evolved into other products like you did metric, other people did products for the European market. Secondary manufacturers started pursuing finger jointing as one particular model. You did some of that as well.
Yeah, well as time went on, in order to do business with the Japanese, first of all, you had to allocate a certain product, a certain volume, and that allocation had to be in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third or fourth quarter of the year. So you signed contracts that committed you to certain product sizes by volume,
right,
by quarter.
Right.
So it was very important for us to be able to have a consistent flow of fiber coming in order for us to meet those obligations. And what we started to find is that as the sawmills went into different areas for their timber supply, the quality of the product started to change dramatically on us, and therefore we were not able to supply the contracted volume. So we had to look at other ways and means of doing secondary industry, and finger jointing was kind of a very key part. I mean, all of the kiln dried blocks were being chipped and sent to the pulp mills, which at that time the pulp mills weren't that interested in the kiln dried part of the fiber. It gave them trouble in their processing of the paper. Right. They were more interested in the green chip. So the sawmills were very interested in selling their trim blocks, right, at either a value that was comparable to chip or better.
Right.
And we started finger joining in 1996, 97, and we're still finger joining today.
Now, if you look at, there's so much in the news about all the downsizing of the industry, mills being shut down, and as a result of pine beetle and all of those kind of things. How do you see that now as it is evolving as we speak? And then also what will happen hereafter in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Well, given the experience that you gain in the secondary industry, that the acquiring of your fiber in order to produce your product changes, and it changes dramatically within a month or within a quarter, is that you're very sensitive to the fact of what's going on in the industry today. The pine beetle affected us because of the dry, split, cracked wood. It didn't suit our product all that well, but going forward, is there has to be more what I would call high technology engineering towards a wood product that can be manufactured locally with high technology. And that a market has to be developed in order for the use for this product. So it's something that has to be on the table for our young people, I believe, to take hold of. And hopefully people like myself that have been in the industry for 50 years, leave them alone, because you got to think outside the box. Right. So those that have been in the box all this many years should stay out of it.
So although the industry will be smaller, not only here but also down the coast and different, we will likely have to pursue new products for new markets and introducing new technology. And we have the fiber still. There is still a future here for an industry, but it will be different, is what you're saying, really.
Well, definitely the fiber is here. It's the approach that we take to the fiber has to change. Yeah. And it has to come from the engineering side, and then the development of products and the development of the market. And I mean, I wish I was 50 years younger today, because I can see a bright future in this industry, but we have to change how we process the product.
Yeah, and also would you see that developing the new skill sets, because a lot of times the equipment or the technology that we employ is totally different than what we do today. In the region here, we have a Trades and Technology Center as part of CNC, but we have to go beyond that in terms of developing the new skill sets for the new industry that will follow 5, 10 years, 20 years from now. Would you agree?
Definitely. And you know, the message that we've got to make to the young people is that the forest industry isn't a sunset industry. It isn't a dying industry. It can be a very progressive industry, but they have to do it. Yeah. And they have to start thinking about the technology and the ability to market the product.
And now what we hear is that we are now in BC at a level where we are a very high cost producer of lumber. Part of that is relating to stumpage that is at a high level right now, declining gradually, and the other one is obviously the duties, the 21 to 25% of duties that secondaries and primaries are paying that makes us even less competitive. How do you see that as we go forward?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a cycle. It's been going on for a while now, and I honestly believe that that the continuation of making a dimension type product has to change, and I continue to talk about the fact that you know, the whole idea of looking at our fiber, going into some conceptual processings, engineering the product in order that it can be used in many facets of our life, is what we have to start to do now.
Yeah, and also communities becoming more involved in terms of looking at how can they attract further manufacturing, and how should they be involved in terms of creating new skill sets, you know, that are hopefully training facilities here. I've always kind of looked at a center of excellence where we do research and development, and then training in specialty jobs as we require in the industry. You see that as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, where the secondary industry is today is, you know, it's viewed and considered as being on the lower end of the wage scale, but that's only because we haven't done our job the way we should, and that is to look at the secondary industry and to look at pre-engineered products that will have a place in our market.
And now in particular, now all the challenges are there for government, for the primary sector, for the communities, for secondary manufacturers. Is the time now right for that the dialogue in a full, meaningful way can happen, and say, how do we, right from the very foundation, how do we become better stewards? How do we grow the proper species, more cubic meter per hectare, and lay the foundation for going forward?
Yeah, and I mean, there has been a lot of those discussions.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, John, is that's exactly where they are still today, discussions.
Right.
We got to get on with getting the work done.
I agree. So I believe that is a future. You believe that is a future.
Absolutely.
And I very much appreciate you being my guest today at the history of the BC forest industry. And to our guest, this was our first episode of many to follow, where we bring in stakeholders from different sides of the industry to discuss the problems from today, look at the past, and in particular look towards the future as to where the industry should go from here. Thank you very much for watching.